Hello and welcome to our Mexico City edition of My Surrogacy Journey, the podcast. We are here today with JiJi and Charlie, both of them who are representatives and owners, founders, you're going to tell me in a second, but of Cryologistics. And the podcast today is really focused on all of those people who have cells, embryos, sperm, eggs to transport cryogenically, am I using the right terminology there? Yeah, to destinations. But today we're focusing primarily on Mexico City and all of the elements around that. So it's great to have you in the studio, guys. I'm seeing you more and more now, which is lovely because we're working together more and more closely. But it's great to have you in Birmingham, because it's often in Mexico where I'm seeing you guys. So let's just give us a bit of an introduction into yourselves and a little bit of an overview of Cryologistics, how it kind of came about and what role you play.
Sure. Yeah, so at Cryologistics, we specialize in the international cryogenic transport of reproductive cells, predominantly embryos and frozen gametes, so frozen eggs and sperm. And it's an all-inclusive service. So we actually physically hand carry the cells from lab to lab, and we take care of everything. So we have a team of lawyers who will help expedite import or export permits. And then when it comes to customs, we make sure that nothing gets held up at customs and that the whole process, whole transport process is smooth and as efficient as possible, really. So we also guarantee that all our transports are completed in just 24 to 72 hours.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was a really quick overview. Thank you, Charlie. JiJi, give us a little bit about you and what you do in Cryologistics.
Yeah, sure. So Charlie is the founder of Cryologistics. I am the co-founder. I also run the operations and marketing side of things. So normally when you get to meet us, you'll see Charlie is more of a sales role. So he's the first kind of face of a company that you're going to see.
Yeah.
And then you'll come to me. And then
to make it happen, to make shit happen, right?
Yeah. So I'll be working with my operations team to get your transport sorted and in the process. Yeah. And then as well in the marketing at the end, you'll see me asking you a few questions of how well we did or not.
Right. And look, and today's podcast really is to help people understand the whole mechanics of the process of getting embryos from one country to another. And I know people know that this happens all the time, and cells and gametes and embryos are transported around the world all of the time. This is not something new. This is not something that's, high risk. It's something that's well trodden and people are doing it all the time. But I think people know that it happens, but I think people really don't understand, what happens from A to B and everything in between. And I think why I really wanted to record this podcast, one was to highlight the amazing service and team that you have there and why we partner with you for our Mexico City pathway, but also to really help people understand the intricacies of some of the elements, because it's not that straightforward getting cells from A to B, because you're dealing with different jurisdictions, different legal processes, customs, flights, delays, and everything in between, right? So that's why I really wanted to do this podcast, really to get into the detail, to help people, one, have confidence in the process and understand the lens that you go to safeguard all of those things. Because, I know we're going to talk about it, but 100% success rate delivery, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So, and it was, how do we achieve that? And what are some of the things that we need to consider? But also, what are some of the things that the intended parents or the people sending those cells have to consider? And again, remember, we're not just considering it at one end, we're considering it at both ends, because there's legal elements and compliance elements that we need to consider.
Yeah.
So let's just really, first of all, before we get into kind of the detail of the mechanics of it, let's talk about your team, because I've been working with you guys for a while now. You provide a really efficient and well-managed service. I know you're very aligned to how we operate as a business, and that's really important to us in how we work with partners, because we want to make sure that we're all on the same page but have the same values. Tell us a little bit about how Cryologistics came about and who's involved as a team and where you're based.
Sure. So Cryologistics mainly came about from my experience as a professional medical courier. I have over almost 10 years of experience and traveled to over 70 countries and completed hundreds of hand carry cryogenic transports. So I used to work for my father's company called IVF Couriers. They're based mainly in Europe, and they operate mainly between Europe and Asia. And we saw, so this was last year when we started Cryologistics, we saw that there was a real need for a safe company, a reliable company for Latin America. And so we have a base in Cancun, Mexico. So the company is registered in the UK, but we also operate between the UK and the Americas. And so that's how it came about, really, for that need to transport to especially Latin America.
Yeah, and I think, as we've experienced with our Mexico City program, there's a massive growth in Latin America and the ability and also the confidence in those pathways now. And I think that's what's driving people, particularly, from our experience of seeing the growth of our Mexico City program. But I think that's happening across there. And to be able to facilitate this type of pathway for people, we need to have the services that align with that to help people be successful. Now, I know that you're a small team, but that's really good in lots of ways because you're a very connected team. Tell us a little bit about your team and how that dynamic works.
Yeah, so we're a UK-based company, but because we focus on Latin America, we really need to be there so that we have our offices in Cancun, but also we're a family-operated business. So my parents are involved. I'm actually an IVF baby. So my parents had a very difficult time conceiving. They took about 4 years to have me. So I'm their little miracle baby. And, knowing and growing up with this, knowing how difficult it is, when I came to this job and, I kind of met Charlie, I kind of fell into the cryotransport world. And I fell in love with, going to the clinics and seeing how, families were so happy of, they've been trying for years and all of a sudden they're getting what they've wished for their whole lives. But it was also so heartbreaking to see some families come out and they're crying and they're so sad. And I was like, I love this job because you can make somebody's,
You play a massive part in that process, right?
Yeah. And, my parents have always, been this part of my journey, always encouraged me to do what I wanted. And knowing that they also had a really hard time having me and then their little bundle of joy, I'm like, I want other families to have that. And so my parents also are in love with what we do. So they came to the team.
Amazing.
And my dad is head of business development. His name is Jaime. And he's a really good key aspect to have in the team because he's Mexican. We lived in the U.S. for a very long time. So we kind of have for both aspects of things. But we truly understand what Latin America is like and how difficult it is to work with.
Yeah.
Because the U.S., the UK, and other first world, countries are a little bit, they have their processes, systems set up. You follow them and you get to where you need to be. Mm-hmm. Versus in Latin America, it doesn't work that way. There's a lot of great areas. There's a lot of entities that are not working with each other. And so you are actually the one that has to come in and make them work with each other and kind of outline the path.
Connect the dots.
So, yeah. So my dad has a lot of this kind of knowledge, and he's one of the reasons why we're getting Mexico kind of sorted and figuring it out, which is really good because then IPs can go to Mexico and not have the problem.
No, totally. Yeah.
We're kind of, solving that issue for them.
Yeah, and I think, our relationship and our partnership has helped to build the success of being able to export embryos out of the UK. And I know typically before we were working on it, it was really, really challenging, but we kind of worked together to create an infrastructure that makes it really possible and really successful and really quick and efficiently, because it is about, again, making sure that whole infrastructure is there to kind of make sure we can export. And that's a real... I do a lot of consultations with IPs and people just have this misconception that, exporting is like near impossible. And it used to be, but it's about working with the experts who are very experienced in the destinations where you're looking to export to enable to make sure that you can do it successfully, safely, and in the time frame that works. Now, Charlie, you talked a little bit earlier about a really key element of what you guys do, and you talked about hand carry.
Yep.
Now, tell us why hand carry is so important, and what that means as well. Sorry.
Yeah, so hand carried literally does mean hands carried, right? So the equipment we use is the state-of-the-art equipment from a manufacturer called MVE, and it's cryogenic equipment. And the word cryogenic, just to give the definition, means that the temperature inside is minus 150 degrees Celsius or below. And actually it's closer to minus 196 degrees because that's the temperature of liquid nitrogen. So these tanks, we call them, but they're also called cryo shippers or dry shippers. They're charged with liquid nitrogen. So they're completely filled with liquid nitrogen in a lab. And then the liquid is absorbed into this porous material around the outside of the container. And then inside you've got a goblet, and inside that goblet go the canes, and on these canes there are visor tubes, and inside these visor tubes there are straws, and inside these straws are your cells. So that's basically...
There's so many like layers in between, and it's really interesting to understand, because like when I first started working this, I didn't have a clue about what the logistics of it all are, how it happens, what things you need to consider, and how things literally get from A to B.
Yeah, and then going back to hand carry, this is why it's so important to choose a hand carried company, especially if you're transporting embryos that have been through so much to get to where they are now. And it's just the safest and most efficient service and way to transport samples, because the difference between hand carry and say a normal freight service like DHL, FedEx, is that you don't know how long it's going to take. They are forced to go through X-ray machines, which can potentially, there is a small risk, but there is still a risk there of cells being damaged.
Yeah, so that
by choosing a hand carry service, we actually pre-alert at every checkpoint. So we pre-alert the airline that we're flying with, so that they allow us on board. We pre-alert the security, airport security, and customs that we're coming through, so that there's never any issue. They're never going to get to go through any X-ray machines, and they're going to have non-intrusive, so like a swab test, just to test so that they're cleared through that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people just don't understand the kind of all of the elements of that, and then really that's kind of what the focus of the podcast is today. So let's talk a little bit about hand carry, and hand carry is important for a lot of reasons, making sure that the samples are maintained upright, the temperature integrity, no one's messing with them, and then from a hand carry point of view, they would be with the courier all of the time, wouldn't they? The courier would have sight of them, they would know where they are. They don't leave that person, do they?
No, and they're monitored at all times. So we give regular updates on where they are, so the geographical position, but also every checkpoint, right? So every time we board a flight, we land, every time we go through customs, or we go through airport security, or we arrive at a laboratory to either collect or deliver, every single stage is updated in real time. And then...
Yeah, like another thing why it's important to hand carry is because they're not with us all times, but also these cells, you have to maintain a certain temperature, minus 196, but also the tank needs to stay upright in order for that temperature to maintain. And it's really, compared to freight companies, you don't really know if they stay upright the whole time. Sometimes you see freight just
being thrown,
yeah. So sometimes that's really hard to see if they did maintain what is supposed to be maintained.
Yeah. It's the unknown, isn't it? Once you hand that over to, a freight handler who's going to manage it and from A to B, that it's just going to get put on, it's going to go in the hold, it's going to go in, and it's just going to be managed however people manage freight, right? And that's not always, some people might be happy with that, and and maybe if you are transporting sperm, that might be, it's more robust and hardier and less risk, then you might say that's right for you. But I personally wouldn't be shipping or transporting anything that had any risk associated with it, and for me it would always be hand carry.
We also see another thing that a lot of people are you're investing a lot of money into this, and for some people it might be their last sperm samples, it might be their last chance to have a baby. And sometimes they are wanting to go for an affordable cryo shipping company, but the shipping part is one of the most essentials because you want them to arrive safely.
Yep.
These clinics are working so hard to get you the best graded embryos, the best graded cells possible. And, the journey, if the temperature drops, that can damage your cells and your chances to have a baby. So I wouldn't recommend somebody going more affordable just because it's a small part of the process.
No, I agree.
I think, you really need to, do your due diligence, make sure that they're doing the hand carry, make sure that they are experts in the area that they say they are. I just really recommend, even for like sperm samples, sperm is more resilient. They can withstand temperature changes, whatever. But if they're your last sperm samples,
no, totally.
Maybe they can get lost in the shipping or something. So I think hand carry is a better way to go.
And that's the difference with us, is we really care about the samples that we're transporting. We really understand how valuable they are to our customers, to the intended parents at the end of the day. And that's why we have so many strict checks in place and safety protocols. So all of our cryoshippers are fitted with a data logger that monitors the temperature at all times. And so the courier will then update operations, and then we will update our customers on the exact temperature. And then also the other check is the weight. So these, like I said before, these cryoshippers are charged with liquid nitrogen, and the charged weight is so important. So when we first go and collect the samples at the Origin laboratory, we record the weight of the cryoshipper and the temperature, and we make sure that then we record the weight and temperature during the delivery, and then we make sure that it's all operating.
They're quite heavy as well, aren't they? I remember I met you in one of our Mexico clinics, and just to kind of be there, because I was in Mexico, and I was really surprised how heavy they actually are.
Yeah.
So it's close to 10 kilograms per cryoshipper. So it's that limit, and we have to kind of see that with the airlines, and sometimes
of course.
But they also have their spatial, like case, and we carry it. Like we manage well to transport them, because also the suitcase they're in, it's padded, it's taken care of. We even go to the extent of if you're walking cobblestones, going and you have to like pick it up and carry it, because that movement, we're even to the minimal of to take care of those aspects.
And I think it's really like not for everyone, but for some people it's really precious cargo, and this is their last hope to use their own genetic material to be able to create a family. And I think that's a lot of pressure, right? I don't think I would like to be a shipper. Sorry, I don't think I would like to be one of your team, like transplant, because the pressure is immense, right? I mean, it's about getting everything from A to B safely and in the time frame that it needs to.
Yeah. All our couriers are highly trained, and we have a rigorous training program that they go through, and they're taught how precious the cargo is that they're transporting, and the other thing I didn't mention is that these cryoshippers actually go inside the aircraft cabin, right? So just to make sure that they're upright at all times, like JiJi said, and that they'll maintain their optimal temperature of minus 196 degrees.
Amazing. So what I wanted to really talk through, so I think a lot of people underestimate the number of kind of parts or kind of components involved in, starting to think about getting your embryos from the clinic where you created them out to, let's just say, Mexico City as an example. And I think, we as a team, with you guys have been working really closely to kind of make it more smooth and get the communication and everything in line so that it's a really high performing team. Now, what struck me when I was working it over the weekend is like just how many different people or partners are involved in the whole process, and just from my team, Deb is involved in it, I'm often involved in it, and one of the membership team are involved in it. And then you've got like the clinic where let's just say that, they've created embryos at one clinic, we then need to move them to one of our hub clinics to export them. So you've got that clinic, you've got the hub clinic, you've then got the clinic in Mexico, you've got your team, you potentially got the HFEA if there's anything outside of the normal general direction. There's so many different partners or people involved in the whole process, and everyone needs to do their bit to enable it to be exported, and also for it to be received by the clinic in Mexico.
Yes. Yeah, it's quite a difficult process. And I think a lot of people expect it to be like, if you were traveling by yourself, you buy your tickets, you get on the plane, you travel, you leave them at the clinic and that's it. But there's so much going on behind the scenes.
There is.
And sometimes when the IPs come to us or to you, they really don't know where to start or how to do it because there's not a lot of information about this part of the transport process.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really kind of lost. And even sometimes clinics at the destination or the origin clinic can be a bit lost because of certain processes. For example, the destination clinics in Mexico, they need to, get permits. But even that's not straightforward because, their job is to make the embryos, Their job is not really the permit itself. So we have developed, a legal team that will help them in easing that transition, and that can actually tell them the steps, what they need to do to make it simpler for them. Because you also have the legal involved. For us, you also have, customs to deal with. You have TSA agents to deal with. And even then in the transport process, like once we have it all sorted with your origin, your destination, the actual transport process, maybe if we're transporting from the UK straight to Mexico, there might be a straightforward flight, right?
Direct flight, yeah, it's just easy, right?
But maybe sometimes you need to take layovers. And sometimes, even if you enter the States, even if they're not going to the States, they might ask you for special permit or things. And so you need to prove that to them. So the logistics, there is a lot involved in the back end.
Yeah, we pride ourselves on, like I said, the actual transport process. We want the samples to go from lab to lab as quickly as possible. So that's why we really pride ourselves on the efficient transport time of just 24 to 72 hours. But that's only because we've spent weeks planning all the pieces in place before.
Yeah, I mean, look, I travel frequently, US, Mexico, all over, and I know how complex trying to manage travel is and trying to book it, and then you're also working with what time the samples can be collected from the clinic. How does that impact your flight? Where is the clinic? How are you going to can you get to the airport? Then once you leave the UK, you've then got to be thinking, when do I land? Do I need to take another flight? Is the receiving clinic, are they open? Can they receive? Like, there's so many different components that people just have no idea that you have to work around. And it is quite, to get samples from one to another, a lot happens in between. And there's a lot of parties that have to do it. I mean, if I just look at, the general compliance of being able to export, so the HFEA, the regulator in the UK, any international export has to meet a certain standard, and it has to be set and documented. I mean, I'm telling you guys, all of that, but it's for you watching. So, but there's lots of kind of compliance that need to be done to enable those samples to be able to be exported. And if they don't have all of that documentation in place, they literally cannot be sent. So, it's about screening, it's about donor consents, it's about clinic consents, it's export consents. There's a lot of work to do, and as an organisation, Debbie and the team work really hard to get as much of that paperwork and information done in advance so that when you do start dealing with the clinic, it's all done. And that's, again, another component that we provide within our membership. And if you were doing it on your own with your clinic, you would have to do all of these things, right? And that's why working in partnership with a very experienced transport company, particularly in Mexico, because of the links that you have there and your dad and all of those elements, that's what makes a difference. And I think some people do think, I can do this on my own, or I'm just going to try and manage cost and do it cheaply. And I would just really encourage people just to really look at all of the components if they think that that's the route, and just don't take the risk. I don't think you're significantly saving a massive amount of money. And there are other areas throughout this journey where you can potentially try and save some funds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Charlie, let's talk in a little bit more detail about that compliance element. So I mentioned it briefly but there's compliance in the UK, there's compliance in the origin country that you're sending it to. They're never the same, right? And I think a lot of people, particularly some of the lab managers that I've spoken to in the UK, they just assume that once they've done their UK bit, they don't have to worry about the rest of it. Tell us about your experience, particularly with Mexico City. How challenging is the whole permit process? How does it work? What are the things that people need to think about and consider?
So we in Mexico is quite particular because you need import permits, and not many countries need import permits for reproductive cells, but in Mexico they are very strict. And it's a government organization called COFEPRIS, and navigating that has been quite complicated for us. But it's been our focus because it's kind of the final hurdle for us to then enter Mexico safely and efficiently to be able to deliver within that time frame that I mentioned earlier. And they normally take about 45 working days to apply for a permit, and these import permits, they're between the origin clinic or laboratory to the destination laboratory, so they need to communicate between themselves, and the business that needs to apply for this permit is actually the receiving clinic. And we work with a legal team in Mexico City, like as JiJi mentioned, who can help to expedite this process.
Well, I think it's important for people to understand as well that the way Mexico operates, there's something called coyotes in Mexico, which are people that are from internal COFEPRIS that are trying to get you these permits. These permits essentially are free. They're made by the government and they are supposed to be free. The problem with COFEPRIS is the time period it takes for them from submitting the application to getting it. It can take up to 6 months to a year. So we're actually working with a legal team that will not only help the clinics get these permits, but also advise them on, how many permits do we need to get, how often, getting close to COFEPRIS so they know us as a shipping company. They know us that we are actually doing things the right way and we're following rules, because it does happen that Latin America, not everybody follows rules, right? And it's such a complicated process that sometimes it's easier to not do it the right way. And so these agencies, of course, don't want that to happen. So they put a lot of barriers up for the people that are trying to do it right. So we're working with this legal team to support your destination clinic so they can get these COFEPRIS permits within 45 days. Meaning that the length to get it sorted from start to finish is going to be shorter than you going on your own or your clinic trying to figure out that.
Yeah. And I think the advantage of that is they know how it works, they know the language to use, they know the type of things that they're looking for, and they position the applications in a way that hopefully will be successful. Let's talk a little bit in a bit more detail about the actual permits themselves. And so my understanding is that you can apply for a single permit for one trip, so that if it's a set of intended parents, they will need to get embryos for one to another, you can apply for a permit for that. Or you can apply for a permit from a clinic which covers a 6 month period and has an infinite number of gametes that can be moved within that permit. Is that a true representation?
Well, they're actually getting a lot stricter now because of what JiJi mentioned in terms of people not doing it the right way. COFEPRIS have actually caught on to that, and they're putting up barriers and they're making it a lot stricter, right? So they're checking these permits, and they're making it a lot harder for the clinics to apply for them. But they are setting a limit in terms of how many samples can be per permit. And like I said before, our legal team will help to navigate that whole process.
But I think that's even more of a demonstration why you need to work with an experienced transport company who understand the process, can be successful, and you just takes all that stress, anxiety away from it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I mentioned that we have some hubs, and one of the hubs that we work with at the moment is Herts and Essex Fertility Centre. Now, linked to the permits, we know that a lot of the people that we work with, they create embryos, not necessarily for surrogacy. They were creating it for their own IVF, which means that they're working with clinics from all over the country. And that means that's typically where they have their embryos stored. So often they come to their end of their fertility journey, and their next natural route, and sometimes for a lot of people, their last route is surrogacy. So a lot of people have embryos all over the country. And as for the perfect reason that you were just talking about in terms of the permits, Charlie, we can't directly send embryos from all of those individual clinics to Mexico City, because we know how much is involved in just sending from our hub to that. Imagine having to add all of those other clinics into the mix. So what we've done at My Surrogacy Journey is worked with some of our clinic partners and with Cryologistics to create a transport hub, and Herts and Essex is one of those transport hubs. And the plan is that the embryos that people have in other clinics are then moved internally from those clinics into the clinic hub, Herts and Essex, and then transported out from Herts and Essex to Mexico City. So that's the most efficient way for us to be able to get those embryos moved from the internal clinics down to that and then out to Mexico City. In terms of how that's managed, I mean, there's not as much regulation for those internal movements, right? They don't have to do the same level of checking as they would for an international export as they would for an internal one, right, Charlie?
Yeah, exactly. And all of these internal transfers, so from a UK to UK clinic, they're all done within 24 hours. So they're same day. And then what we try to do at Cryologistics is then group several IPs sample cells together into one cryoshipper. So the cryoshippers that we use are the largest that MB manufacture, and therefore we can combine multiple embryos from multiple or cells from multiple IPs, and then therefore it's just one transport to the destination clinic in Mexico City.
That's really efficient from a time point of view for the intended parent and for you, because you must do some air miles, right? But also it's about that helps us manage the cost around that, because I think a lot, we recognize that this is a very expensive process. Surrogacy, fertility, it's all comes at a cost, and we've tried to keep. And one of the reasons why we do sequenced or kind of bulk shipments with multiple in there is that because then we can manage that cost associated with it. And I know, Charlie, JiJi, some of the challenges that you guys face around. We all know how costly air travel is now, and how depending on when it's booked. I mean, you don't have the foresight of being able to book flights a year in advance, so you don't get it at the most cost effective way. So inevitably, when you do book flights, they're not the cheapest they can be. So there's a lot of cost associated with it. And I think a lot of people just think that it is just that flight. Well, just look at and we've been talking about it, look at the amount of work that goes on to I know how many hours I spend just from our side. There's so much time and energy that goes into this, and all of that comes at a cost as well. It is about, we've got to be realistic about what we're achieving and what the reality is from a cost point of view on that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned it earlier, Charlie. You talked about X-ray machine, and samples shouldn't be going through the X-ray machine. Let's talk a little bit more about that whole customer process. So when you do arrive, whether you're leaving or whether you're arriving in, let's say, Mexico City, what are some of the things or some of the challenges that you face, particularly with customs and security and all of those elements?
Yeah, well, again, Mexico's particular in the sense that they kind of force you to declare when you arrive at customs. And at Cryologistics, we've prioritized having relationships with the airports, so that when we arrive, they know we're arriving. So like I said before, we pre-alert them, and we tell them that we're arriving with X amount of samples that are going to X clinic, and that makes the process very smooth, and they then that there's no delay when we arrive at customs. Whereas normally they would just force everyone to put all their bags upon arrival through X-ray machines, and we navigate our way around that by having a relationship with the airports.
I suppose it's about kind of making sure that you are planning for every eventuality. You're not taking any risk. It's about if they know you come in, you're less likely to have a problem, right? And it's about, and again, that's the right thing to do, isn't it? You carrying precious cargo, we've got to look at all of the steps and how do we de-risk all of those elements.
Yes, and I think also, that yes, when you arrive, we have a relationship with customs and everything, but it's also the previous work we have done. So while we're working behind the scenes, a lot of this is the internal documentation we as a shipping company have to make in order to go through, TSA, security.
Oh, we all know what TSA is like. I mean,
everything.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have the right paperwork, and they're very specific in ways they want things done. And it's weird, but every country is different.
Yep.
But also every city is different.
Yep.
But also every airport is different. And even sometimes internally within the terminal, they are different.
Yeah, no.
So we do have the experience of going through so many airports, so many ways that we have our paperwork structured so that they'll let us through. And we do this on a regular basis. I mean, the amount of cells we transport to Mexico on a monthly basis, we know inside out what they want and how to navigate. So at this point, it's just like, second nature to that.
Yeah, and all of your team speak English and Spanish, so that's a major component as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you do come up with any kind of challenge, you're able to have a really clear conversation about how you're going to resolve this and what the plan is.
Yeah.
And that's enabled us to maintain our 100% success rate in safe cryogenic transport.
And that's really important, isn't it? Even one failed shipment is catastrophic, isn't it, to everyone's business, because that no one wants that, And I know, Charlie, I speak to a lot of IPs who are really anxious. And I think one of the things that I like about working with your team is that I know that if the IP is really anxious, you'll just get on a call with them and give them some reassurance and talk them through the process and all of those elements. And I think that's important. I mean, most people aren't. They kind of get it, but you just don't know where people have come from and what journey they've been on and why they're so, quite scared about what's going to potentially happen to their embryos and how are they going to be safeguarded and how are they going to get from A to B, and are they going to be damaged? Are they going to be impacted? And that's a massive. People have a lot of anxiety around that, and I think your team really helped manage that.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, we're not the only cryotransport company out there, but what we love and what we believe differentiates us from everyone else is that personal element. So we really want them to know us, and we're more than happy to have a video call or phone call if anyone has any questions or want to go over some details about the process.
I think one of the things that I kind of wanted to pick up is that we're as a team and with our transport hubs and with the receiving clinic in Mexico, we're trying to create an environment where we can all communicate really well. We share documentation and we share information so that, the IPs only have to supply it once. And for me, that's really important because I think this is a really stressful time for a lot of people, because often they typically will have a surrogate potentially getting ready in Mexico City. So getting their embryos into Mexico City in the time frame that we expect is really important, because it then potentially impacts their onward journey with their surrogate. And I think it's about how do we be as efficient as possible. And I think one of the things that I would say to those watching and listening, if you are embarking on with us and you are kind of getting ready to prepare to kind of transport embryos, really just get your information in on time. There's a lot of information that needs to be done. There's a lot of forms and stuff to be completed, consents, customer service agreements, all of those things. Them done on time, because it's really important, because there's so much that we have to do with it once it's been supplied to us. And then, and remember, we're never just dealing with one set of IPs. We might be dealing with, 6 and 7 sets of IPs all at one time, all, relying on all of those people submitting the information to enable us to get it efficiently and exported.
Yeah, and also just to stay calm. Trust us, we are working hard behind the scenes, and even if you don't hear from us at one point, trust us, we are working on your shipment at all times. Yeah. And if we do have questions, we're always on call. You can always email us. I mean, we're working hard towards that communication. So we're always ready to help on a video call or an email or whatever it's needed. But yeah, we are working very hard to get. And it's just having a little bit of patience, because it is a lot of moving parts.
It is.
And, another thing I think to take into consideration is the origin clinics tend to be more difficult, because in all honesty, you're their client and they don't want you to let go. But also, it's the fact that they worked so hard to create such precious embryos for you. They don't want them, to leave. And then all of a sudden the clinic that you're working with to, destroy them or anything like that. So the origin clinic, we work really fast within Cryologistics. Within 1 to 2 weeks, transport is kind of ready to go. And even in those 2 weeks, we can actually do the transport process. The actual transport takes 24 to 72 hours from the origin clinic to the destination clinic. But prior to that, it's really a lot based on your origin clinic and whether they're answering us. Sometimes they actually avoid us.
Yeah.
They go to answer and they don't pick up the phone.
Yeah.
They don't, because essentially they don't want you to leave.
They don't, but also remember, you're not you're not their patient, and they don't necessarily have consent from like the IPs need to give their origin clinic consent to be able to talk to you and to us. You know, so we absolutely want to manage as much on your behalf as possible, but there are processes in place that have to be done to allow them to speak to us and to potentially act on their behalf. I also think that, you know, people need to consider as well, particularly with their origin clinic, is that they might not be familiar with doing lots of international stuff or moving embryos. So you have to factor in how long it's going to take them and their lab to be able to get set up to be able to move them. You also need to prepare, and the fact that, you know, that they're going to charge you a fee to facilitate that export, because they do have to complete a lot of paperwork. I've not met a clinic yet that doesn't charge for that element. You're also probably going to be charged to the receiving clinic to receive them. And if it's going out again, you might be charged again. So it is about understanding all of those components, and we can help you manage and navigate that. But, you know, it's about sometimes we have to educate those origin clinics on what's needed to export and some of the things that they need to have in place. So as an example, you know, if donor eggs were used during the embryo creation, we have to get donor consents. You know, some of you know, if they're a heterosexual couple, they might not have been screened for surrogacy because their status changes to a donor. So there's an enhanced level of screening that needs to be done. So we then need to do retrospective screening. Now, we pick all of this up with our IPs who are intending to ship really early on anyway, but the origin clinic might not have done it. There are some elements of the HFEA where a physical examination needs to be done when embryo creation was done, and some of them might not have done that. So we have to get retrospective done. So it's all of those things that, you know, sometimes if the origin clinic isn't experienced at international surrogacy or international export, then we have to start working with them. And sometimes they work really well with us, and sometimes they work against us. And we have to then start, you know, working with the IPs to help them get what they need from the clinic, so then we can kind of keep everything moving. So again, you know, there's lots of moving parts. There's lots of things that we need to consider. But again, that's why we include it in membership. That's why we facilitate the management of it with our transport partner and kind of ensure that there is a smooth process from end to end, because there's so much more that happens behind the scenes that IPs just have no comprehension. And that's not their fault. You know, it's not their responsibility. It's ours. But I wouldn't want to be doing this on my own. I wouldn't want to be dealing with potentially 3 clinics or 2 clinics to kind of make sure you have everything in place.
Yeah. And then you get a lot of different information. Your origin clinic's going to ask you for certain things, your destination for others. And sometimes, you know, it could be difficult to manage on your own. So plus us, we're getting used to working together. We have great communication. We know how we work. And so we can get the process done easier, smoother, faster. And
totally. And I think with every shipment we send out, we get better at it. You know, I know that we have a system that we all can access now, and we can all access all of the information. We're being efficient. We're not having to send emails everywhere. That works. You already work with that system. We work with that system. We're trying to get the clinics to work with it as well, so that we are end to end. And that does make a real difference, doesn't it, on the efficiency and how long it takes to be able to get, you know, everything ready so that we can export it. You know, it's not like you decide you want to ship your embryos one day, we ship them the next day. It's not like that. There's a lot of work that needs to get us to the point before we can say, right, the clinic's ready to say we're ready to ship.
Yeah. And we get, I think, a lot of those questions, especially from IPs that are doing surrogacy. And, you know, sometimes they contact us and they're like, I need it done right away because my surrogate is already, you know, in the process. I'm like, oh, well, we can help you, but it's not an overnight process.
No.
It's not that in 1 week we're going to have everything sorted. It does depend on a lot of moving parts. And, you know, if you're going through this journey, you're thinking just maybe going to surrogacy or something, just really go and look at the information and consider the transport, even if you don't need it. But so you have your certain timelines and you're able, in case you do need it, you know the time frames that is needed for that shipping process.
No, and again, I think, you know, it's about understanding the process, understanding everything involved, but also, and I say this a lot with particularly surrogacies, get a realistic understanding of what that time frame looks like, because you might be planning stuff on the other end, expecting that your embryos are going to be in country at X point, and then you've got no chance of that happening, right? And then you then have to then move all of the things, understand what you need, and then plan ahead of that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some little fun facts, because like Charlie, you must travel all of the time. what are some of the kind of memorable things that you've had on some of these trips? I mean, I travel frequently, and like I'm getting to hate more and more travel because it has such an impact on me. But how do you deal with it? You know, you're traveling all of the time, and you're across different time zones, different, you know, sleep patterns. How do you, and you know, like Charlie, do you travel in first class? Do you travel in business class? Well, let's talk about some of those little things, because again, I think these are some of the miscomprehensions that people kind of have about the life of a cryologistic transport person drinking champagne in first class in the lounges, all those things. Yeah. Give us the reality.
I wish it was like that all the time. No, unfortunately, most of the time we fly in economy, premium economy. Very rarely do we get upgraded to business class. But sometimes actually the airline staff, so the crew on board, we obviously have to tell them that we're transporting with a cryogenic dry shipper, and sometimes they are very generous and they upgrade us to business class, but that rarely happens. But the actual cryo shipper will often be traveling in business class, even though I'm back in the plane in economy, because they have to be they have their own locker, so they're secured in their own business class locker most of the time. But jet lag is a real thing. You know, anyone who believes otherwise, you know, it's real.
Jet lag is very real.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a really rewarding career as a medical career, and you know, we really pride ourselves in what we do, and it really, like, it warms our hearts to help your wife and be part of the journey to ultimately, you know, creating life. So
and it's a bit crazy because yes, the jet lag is real, and sometimes, you know, you're changing flights and things like that. You have a layover that's like 8 or 12 hours, or you arrive at a destination at 10 p.m. and your next flight's at 3. You don't have much time to like sleep, but there's something about it that, you know, we love what we do, and it's so rewarding that we're getting these cells to where they need to be to actually become a baby, that throughout the whole entire journey, you're kind of like on this kind of like high.
Yeah.
Like you have this energy and you're like, you know, I won't sleep, but I'm going to get these cells where they need to be. And when you do arrive to your final destination and you go home, you do crash very hard, for sure. But during the trip, you get something about it that
it does. It just energizes you, and you want to complete the mission, and you know, safe delivery at the destination laboratory, and then we do take some days off to just recoup.
That's another thing that we take into consideration with our team, like our couriers thing. Because it's not the same thing traveling for leisure as it is for work. And you're constantly on airplanes. You're constantly at high altitudes. But that comes with a lot of, you know, kind of diseases.
And health complications.
It does have an impact. It does have an impact.
So mental health is also very important for our careers. You are under a lot of pressure because of what you're carrying, but also because you're dealing with, you know, security, you're dealing with customs, you're dealing with people that are going to try and like push you down and tell you, no, you're wrong, I'm right, you know? So that can add up. So we need to make sure that our couriers are mentally stable, that they're feeling okay. So we do have regular checks in with them, make sure that they're fine.
Yeah.
Every 6 months, you know, we do a little retraining to make sure that our standards are good. So
I couldn't imagine traveling that. I mean, I travel a lot, but I couldn't imagine traveling at that frequency. I mean, it does have an impact on you, and you know, and you're right. Not having enough sleep, not having enough rest does have an impact on your mental health, and that's really important to consider.
Yeah, even your eating habits change because. Yeah, you have to eat on the run. You don't have time to sit and have a proper meal. So a lot of the time, you know, I want a salad. I just want some veggies and to sit down and have a proper meal. So you do miss it.
And look, like, you know, airports are stressful, security is stressful, getting on a flight is stressful, you know, all of those things are stressful, and it does have an impact. And then finally, let's just quickly talk about how you communicate the kind of from start to end, because I know that you do communicate really effectively with the intended parents about key stages of the journey. There's some really nice little quirky bits in about how you do that. Just just give the person watching or listening a bit of a view of what they could expect from the communication from when their cells are collected to when they get to the, that final destination.
So just, the transport process, we do update regularly, but even before that, we make sure that you're in copy when we communicate with the clinics. So that's, several weeks before the transport actually happens, we need to get the release authorization from the origin clinic, the acceptance authorization from the destination clinic, and then put the clinics in touch with each other as well, so that there's no problem there.
And I think that's also a benefit of having the hubs in the clinic, because it's not like they're just doing a one-off transport. They build those relationships. They're working together. I know Lucy from Hearts and Essex, she's been out to Talulah and Duke. She's audited the lab. She's happy with it. That makes a massive difference in the ability to us all communicate effectively. The relationships are there, but ultimately gets the embryos or their cells from one end to the other much, much quicker.
Yeah, exactly. And then when it comes to the communication, so when we arrive at the origin laboratory where your cells are stored, then we fill out a collection confirmation document, and we never actually handle the samples. That's really important, right? So we're not embryologists, we're not lab professionals. We are experts in what we do, and that's navigating international borders and airlines and customs and everything else. But when it comes to the actual transfer of your cells from the cryogenic storage in the lab to our cryo shipper, that's all done by professionals. So that's done by embryologists for embryos and eggs, and allergologists for sperm. And then the same thing at the destination clinic, we have our delivery confirmation document, and these documents are filled out by not only ourselves as the couriers, but also by the lab staff. So you'll get this, and it's sent to you.
So ultimately, your cells, whatever they are handled by an embryologist at one end, and they're then not touched again till they reach another embryologist at the other end, and they manage the whole process. And I've seen that process of embryos arriving, the embryologist taking them out, checking the temperature, doing all of those things, and checking the tags of the identity, and that it all lines up. And also, it's the containers are sealed, aren't they? The shippers, they're actually sealed, and they check the tags so that they haven't been tampered with in between, and all of those things. So, there's lots that goes on, and, we can't cover everything on this podcast, but I think we should have given people, listening or watching, a really good flavour of what to expect from the process, what you are as a company and how you manage the process, and then kind of some of the mechanics of what happens within it. Because I believe that if people are, quite anxious about their embryos being exported, getting a real understanding of all of the checks, balances, and process that we all go through to ensure that everything's done safely, it should hopefully give them a lot more reassurance about working with Cryologistics and getting their embryos from A to B. I mean, we've transported a lot already, haven't we? And we're on schedule to do another shipment this year, and then potentially more shipments month by month next year. So I'm really excited to continue to build the relationship with you guys. I think you guys are absolutely the right solution for us and our members. It's important that we have that confidence in the partners that we work with, because we do recommend them to our members, and it is always about being successful. So thank you for all the work that you're doing to make this process as smooth and as seamless for our members as possible. But also thank you for recording the podcast today, because I think it's going to be a really valuable resource that people can access, and again, just when they're ready, help them understand what that process looks like. So guys, thank you for coming to Birmingham. I appreciate it. We're going to go out for some drinks, I think, after this. But look, if you thank you guys. It was really interesting, and for me, some of the big highlights from the day was all about really understanding some of the intricacies and complexities of what a journey entails, and really understanding the end-to-end piece. Don't forget, you can get more podcast episodes on our app. You can get it on YouTube. You can get it on Spotify, Acast, and Apple Play. Remember, if you want more information about our service, or if you want more information about Cryologistics, you can find that on our website, which is at mysurrogacyjourney.com. Or if you are a member and you already have access to our app, there's going to be a specific space within our app where you can talk about transport and all of those components, as well as some specific content designed and recorded by you guys about some of the things that you need to consider. Look, it's been great back in our new studio today. Thank you for watching or listening. It's been amazing. I'm on my own. Michael's not here because he's actually in Mexico. I like doing them on my own, which is all really good. But look, thank you both very much, and hasta luego.